I was chopping basil when the message came in. My phone lit up on the counter with a ping I almost ignored. It was Saturday, early afternoon, and I was deep in my weekend ritual, prepping lunch, listening to low jazz, letting the stress of the week bleed out of my shoulders. I wiped my hands, unlocked the screen, and saw the sender. Lucas, my old roommate from med school, now a paramedic, constantly jumping into burning chaos with a joke and a grin. We didn't talk often. We mostly liked each other's posts and occasionally sent memes. But the photo he'd attached made my pulse catch. It was a candid, grainy snapshot of a crowd at a local food festival, booths lined with banners, sunlight cutting through the trees. And front and center, Claire, my wife, hand in hand with another man. Her face turned toward him, laughing. Her fingers looped loosely with his, not the accidental brush of acquaintances or the stiff grip of coworkers. This was relaxed, familiar, intimate. Underneath the photo, Lucas had written, "Hope this isn't a secret." I stared at the image, frozen mid-motion, the scent of basil suddenly sharp in my nostrils. The man she was with. It took me a second. Then it clicked. Brian. She'd mentioned him before. Fellow marketing lead. He'd transferred to her department 3 months ago. I remembered the first time she mentioned him, something about his analytics skills. Then a few offhand remarks. Brian's hilarious. Brian knows this great vendor. Brian's a bit of a coffee snob. Now Brian was holding her hand like it belonged there. I didn't reply to Lucas. I just saved the image and locked the phone. For a moment, the kitchen seemed far away. The soft simmer of tomato sauce, the cutting board, the half-diced garlic, they blurred. In that single moment, something inside me shifted like an axis realigning. I walked to the sink, washed my hands, and stared out the window. Claire was out shopping for throw pillows that day. She'd kissed me goodbye that morning, wearing her white sundress and those earrings I got her last Christmas. Said she might stop by the wine bar if the shops were boring. I picked up my phone again, opened Instagram, and checked her story. For slides. All of them food shots, bao buns, shaved ice, a close-up of a smoothie in a plastic cup. No people. No Brian. I tapped through them slowly, analyzing every corner, every blurred background. If I hadn't seen the photo, I would have believed her story in a heartbeat. That realization stung because of how cleanly the deception was executed. She'd curated her lie like a campaign. The worst part? I hadn't even felt a spark of suspicion earlier. She'd been warm lately. Attentive, even. Kissed me longer. Texted more. Asked if I wanted to see that new movie I'd been rambling about. A month ago, she brought home my favorite whiskey, just because. I thought it meant we were getting back into sync after a rough winter. It turns out that it was just guilt dressing up as affection. I sat down at the dining table and pulled up my calendar. 2 weeks ago, she'd gone on a girls' wine spa weekend. Said it was spontaneous. She left on a Friday, came back late Sunday, and told me about the mud bath that smelled like roses and how they laughed till their abs hurt. Now I wondered where that spa was. Who else was there? I pulled up our shared Uber account. She used it often. Most rides were boring. Work, the gym, and the bookstore, but I kept scrolling until I found the weekend in question. Friday, pick up at 7:06 p.m. Drop off in Midridge Estates. That wasn't near any spa. In fact, it was right around where Brian's LinkedIn said he lived. My chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with clarity. This wasn't an isolated moment of bad judgment. This was infrastructure. Planned, practiced, and repeated. I stared at the receipt. Same address again on a Tuesday night. Timestamped 9:43 p.m. Drop off only, no return ride listed. I leaned back in the chair. The air around me felt thinner, sharper. I didn't call her. I didn't text. There was nothing I wanted to say that wouldn't sound like begging or rage. And she didn't know I had the photo. That was power I didn't plan to waste. Instead, I tapped a contact. "Hey," I said when the call picked up. "Quick question. Remember that prenup clause Mom insisted on when we got married?" A pause. Then a laugh. "Clause 9, my lawyer replied. "Of course I remember." "Why?" "No reason," I said, walking to the stove and turning off the heat. "Just refreshing my memory. Can you send me a copy?" "You're serious?" I didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. After I hung up, I packed the pasta into a container and stuck it in the fridge. Lunch wasn't happening anymore. My appetite was gone, but I knew what came next. No screaming. Claire wasn't going to get a scene. She was going to get a mirror, and she was going to watch herself lose. Sunday arrived with the kind of quiet that settles over a house like freshly fallen snow. Claire was still asleep when I started boiling water. I moved around the kitchen like a man preparing for guests, even though this lunch had only one purpose. I pulled out the imported pasta she liked, the sauce I'd made the day before, and the bottle of wine she once said reminded her of the trip we took to Florence. I wanted everything to be perfect. Precision mattered. By the time she wandered in, wearing a soft sweater and leggings, her hair up in that messy bun she knew made her look effortlessly beautiful, the table was set. The sun poured in through the windows. Vivaldi played low from the living room speaker. Her eyes lit up. "Wow," she said, patting over to kiss me on the cheek. "What's the occasion?" "Just wanted to cook for you," I replied, smiling as if I had all the time in the world. "Figured we could have a proper lunch, just the two of us." She slid into her chair, reached for her glass, and took a sip. You picked the good bottle. I figured you deserved something nice." We talked about small things at first, her morning run, a client pitch she was excited about, the neighbor's new dog that barked through the night. She was relaxed, warm, the woman I thought I married. The one who used to run into my arms at airports and whisper secrets late at night when the world was quiet. But all that was the backdrop. This wasn't about catching her off guard. It was about seeing who she really was when presented with the truth and how she chose to carry it. I waited until we were halfway through the meal before I said anything. The pasta was her favorite, ricotta stuffed, drizzled with a light cream sauce, and accompanied by grilled vegetables. She took another bite, humming approval. That's when I reached for my phone. "I saw something yesterday," I began casually. "Thought you should see it too." She paused, fork midway to her mouth. I turned the screen toward her. The photo was already open, Lucas's snapshot from the food festival. She is holding hands with Brian. The laugh. The intimacy. She looked at it. No gasp. No attempt to deny. She chewed slowly, swallowed, and wiped her mouth with the corner of her napkin. Then leaned back in her chair with the composure of someone waiting for applause. "Yeah," she said with a light shrug. "It was fun." Her tone matched her face, unconcerned. "Settled. I'd do it again." No justification. Just that same subtle, triumphant grin she used when she out-negotiated a client. I watched her, quiet as a held breath. No change in expression. My face remained neutral while inside, something settled into place. Not anger. Just the final tick in a countdown. She thought this was control, that I was the man who would flinch, that the game was hers to play. I reached for my fork and continued eating. She raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to ask why?" I shook my head once and smiled politely. "No." There was a pause. She waited for more. An argument. A breakdown. Something. But I gave her nothing. Claire always loved control. She wore it like perfume. When she wanted something, she didn't ask, she guided. She hinted. She charmed. And if that didn't work, she calculated. This moment was no different. She had built this exchange to be on her terms. A rehearsed performance with one expected response. Confrontation followed by emotional chaos. She was ready to handle drama. Tears. Maybe even rage. What she wasn't prepared for was indifference. "So that's it?" she asked after a moment, uncertain now. I folded my napkin and set it next to my plate. "I'll clean up." No reaction. Her voice cracked slightly, just enough to notice. "I'm thinking," I said, standing up. "And when I'm done thinking, I'll act." With the dishes cleared, I loaded the dishwasher with deliberate calm. She lingered in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, waiting for the rest of the scene that would never come. Instead, I walked past her and opened my office door. The copy of our prenup had already been printed, highlighted, and annotated. Clause 9. In the event of proven infidelity, the aggrieved party receives 80% of jointly held assets and retains all property acquired before marriage. The unfaithful party forfeits alimony. My mother's legacy. People thought it was odd at the time. A prenup was necessary when we had nearly equal earnings. We were both in our late 20s, early in our careers, ambitious but not yet wealthy. But my mother had insisted. A divorce lawyer for 3 decades, she knew what people were capable of when romance faded. I didn't argue. I saw it as insurance I'd never need. Now, I ran my finger down the printed clause and underlined one phrase: proof of infidelity. I didn't need Claire to confess. She already had, with a smile. But for the court, I would need more. Substantive. Documented. Beyond question. A single photo wouldn't be enough. So I opened my laptop and typed, private investigators, discreet marital surveillance, local. The first result was promised in 48 hours. GPS tracking, discreet photography, real-time updates. Perfect. As the page loaded, Claire called from the hallway. So, you're just going to pretend like you're fine? I didn't answer. By Monday morning, the investigation was well underway. I had chosen a firm known for precision and absolute discretion, recommended by a former client from my consulting work. The moment I finalized the contract, they dispatched their best tracker. Her name was Olivia. Soft-spoken, methodical, and equipped with technology that belonged in a spy film. She promised me results within 10 days, often sooner. Don't expect fireworks, she said during our brief phone call. Just truth, wrapped in timestamps. That suited me just fine. Claire's daily routine offered the perfect structure for observation. She worked downtown, usually left home around 8:15 a.m., and had a habit of grabbing coffee 2 blocks from her office. Lunch breaks varied, sometimes solo, other times with coworkers. Twice a week, she taught yoga in the evenings, at least that's what she claimed. I supplied Olivia with every scrap of information, her schedule, her habits, even screenshots of Claire's Google Calendar, which she had once shared during a joint planning spree. In the meantime, I played my role. Each morning, I poured her coffee. I asked about her day. I kissed her cheek with the kind of warmth that masks calculation. I answered her texts with short affirmations and the occasional emoji. Every part of me wanted to pull away, to ice her out completely, but I had learned long ago that silence gathered better evidence than conflict. Claire, for her part, seemed pleased with the equilibrium. If she sensed anything beneath the surface, she didn't show it. Maybe she thought I was truly accepting her betrayal. Perhaps she believed her casual confession had neutralized me, tamed the man she assumed would always swallow his pain and keep the peace. On day 2, Olivia sent me the first batch of data. Claire left work at 5 p.m. Her phone's GPS pinged on a residential street 5 minutes later, Brian's block. She remained there for 2 hours before returning home. Her excuse? Got caught in traffic. There was an accident on Maple. I nodded, pretending sympathy. Day 3 followed the same pattern. A morning filled with phone calls, lunch at the same Thai place she always picked when she wanted to sound busy, and then a post-work visit to the yoga studio, which GPS data confirmed was a florist 2 blocks from Brian's building. She even took a selfie in front of a mural and posted it to her story, captioned, "Namaste." I saved it. Every post now served as a breadcrumb, a misdirection, a tool. On the next day, Olivia changed her tone. "We've got something solid," she wrote in her update. The attached images were shot from inside a parked car, angles slightly elevated, likely from a dashboard rig. Claire stepped out of a rideshare, adjusting her blouse in the reflection of a glass door. The building was a boutique hotel, sleek, all dark steel and ambient lighting. Brian waited just outside the entrance, one hand in his pocket, the other already reaching for hers. She smiled as she walked toward him. He kissed her forehead. They disappeared inside together. Time of entry, 7:46 p.m. Time of exit, 10:03 p.m. The following sequence showed them walking back to the curb, his arm wrapped around her shoulders. They stood by a car, talking, heads close. Then, another kiss, longer this time. She laughed, leaned into him, then got into a rideshare and left. She returned home at 10:24 p.m. Her story that evening. Jasmine's yoga class ran late. I smiled when she said it. By day 5, I had enough to convince any court. Still, I wanted more, because I understood the concept of leverage. Claire was strategic, yes, but careless in her arrogance. The more proof I gathered, the less room she'd have to spin her story into some narrative of emotional neglect or miscommunication. I continued monitoring the financials. Claire had opened a new bank account, something I discovered through a notification meant for our joint portfolio. She hadn't mentioned it, of course, but the trail wasn't hard to follow. Her salary began diverting to the new account. At first, it was subtle, just a few transfers, small enough to pass unnoticed. Then the larger ones. Clear signs she was preparing her parachute. The joint card remained active, though. Her purchases told stories. Wine deliveries to Brian's address, restaurant charges tagged under client lunch that matched the hotel's coordinates, and retail receipts that corresponded to items she didn't wear at home. All documented, all dated, all cross-referenced. On day 6, Olivia provided video footage. It was from the boutique hotel's parking lot. She had managed to access the feed through a contact who owed her a favor. The grain was high, but unmistakable. Claire and Brian were entering the building. His hand slipped around her waist. Her fingers traced along his chest as the door swung shut. The car ride home that night felt surreal. She discussed a new proposal she was working on, which involved layered branding strategies. I nodded, asked one or two questions, and smiled in the right places. She had no idea. By day 8, Olivia had compiled a comprehensive report, including photos, GPS logs, timestamps, financial overlaps, and a recommended timeline for confrontation. I thanked her, transferred the full payment plus a tip. Then I called my attorney. Send the notice, I said. Clause 9. Infidelity trigger. Her voice carried surprise, but no judgment. You're sure? Yes, I replied. She gave me the final piece. And the financials? She's already begun moving funds. We've got documentation of every transfer. Combined with the joint card history, we can build the case for asset misuse. You'll walk away with 80%, she said. Good. Then let's move. That evening, Claire curled up beside me on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder. We watched a documentary about mountain climbers who risked everything to conquer unscalable peaks. As the wind howled on screen and men dangled from ropes over endless ice, she sighed. People are crazy, she murmured, climbing into storms just for a view. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the flickering screen. You'd never do something that reckless, she added, touching my hand. I smiled gently, turning my palm upward to meet hers. I prefer solid ground, I said. What she didn't understand was that she'd already stepped off the cliff, and I was watching her fall. Friday began with the usual rhythm, coffee brewing, sunlight through the blinds, Claire humming softly as she straightened her blazer. She glanced at the mirror near the door, adjusting her collar like a woman heading into a boardroom to win. Her confidence had returned, stronger than ever. She believed the storm had passed. She had no idea it was just gathering. While she tapped out a text, I opened my email and reviewed the final draft from legal counsel. The subject line read, Execution of Clause 9, Infidelity Triggered, Asset Realignment in Process. The attachments included financial breakdowns, annotated timelines, and a detailed explanation of the penalty structure embedded in our prenuptial agreement. It was all there, 8 pages of cold, clinical redistribution, 80% to me. The rest, hers, what little remained. I forwarded the entire package to a secure server and prepped the envelope. My mother always said that truth, when delivered correctly, carries more weight than any weapon. That envelope would land harder than any shouted accusation. Later that morning, I sent another package. An anonymous courier sent this one to Claire's firm's HR department. It included several high-resolution photos, screenshots of her social media locations matched against surveillance timestamps, and a brief summary of company policy regarding personal relationships between managers and direct reports. Brian's signature sat at the bottom of every document we referenced. That night, Claire returned home later than usual. She said they'd had a working dinner. Her team was behind on deliverables. She poured herself a glass of red, sank into the couch, and exhaled deeply, like a soldier back from war. I offered to order something light, maybe sushi or tapas. She smiled, surprised, and nodded. You've been amazing lately, she said. Like, actually amazing. I try. I replied, already dialing the restaurant. The next morning, I confirmed everything with my attorney. HR at her company had begun their review. No name had been mentioned, just a compliance concern, raised anonymously, citing potential breaches of ethics. That alone was enough to warrant internal interviews and a temporary suspension during the investigation. Then came Sunday. Claire thought we were hosting a casual brunch, a small gathering with mutual friends. I let her believe that. I even helped her arrange the cutlery, move the coffee table, and polish the wine glasses. She joked about making mimosas and asked if I could slice the oranges while she chose a playlist. Just keep it soft, she said. Acoustic, maybe. I selected a calm instrumental mix. By noon, everyone was seated. Only this wasn't a random group of friends. It was 3 people, carefully chosen, carefully invited. Her parents, both quietly dignified, and Michelle, her best friend since college, who had stood beside her at the altar during our wedding. Claire entered with a tray of croissants, her expression bright. She greeted them with the ease of someone who believed in her illusion. Then she noticed the projector. "Is that for a slideshow?" she asked, turning toward me. I nodded once. "Yes." "Of what?" "You'll see." The room dimmed slightly as I closed the curtains. I picked up the remote and began the presentation. It started with timestamps. Uber receipts matched against bank statements. Images of street signs. Then came the photographs. Claire and Brian outside the boutique hotel. Their embrace. The kiss by the car. Multiple days. Multiple angles. Silence stretched across the room like a wire. Her mother shifted in her chair. Her father exhaled slowly. Michelle looked away. Claire's hands clutched the edge of the tray. Her voice came out in a whisper. "You went through my accounts?" "I protected mine," I replied. Next slide. The clause from our prenup, highlighted. Then, a breakdown of assets. Graphs. Legal annotations. Her new account with the diverted salary. The label beneath read, "Unauthorized diversion of marital funds. Under review." I walked over and handed her the golden envelope. Inside, she found a certified copy of the prenup, legal documentation of her clause violation, a detailed printout of the projected financial split, a key to the guest room, a formal request to vacate the master bedroom within 24 hours. Claire stood there, still holding the tray. Then came the alert. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Her face turned pale. A second buzz followed. Her lips parted. She stared at me, voice thin. "I've been suspended." I didn't move. "They're investigating. Who sent?" "You should focus on your response," I said. "They'll need it by tomorrow morning." She turned to her mother for help. But the older woman sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap. Her father's voice was low, grave. "You've brought shame into our family. He didn't deserve this." Michelle stood, then approached me. Quietly, she said, "I'm sorry. I never knew it went this far." "Neither did I," I replied. Claire backed into the corner of the room. "It wasn't serious. It was just. It didn't mean anything." I picked up the remote, powered off the projector, and placed it gently on the console. She cried then. Real tears. The kind that begs for mercy long after the sentence has been passed. I walked past her toward the kitchen, the echo of her sobs trailing behind me. As I reached the sink, I washed my hands, then dried them slowly. Back in the living room, the sunlight had shifted. Claire remained standing, the envelope clutched in one hand, its golden paper crinkling. The judge had already spoken. The rest was just administration. The 30 days passed with clinical efficiency. Claire moved into the guest room that same evening, the envelope resting on her lap as she carried a pillow down the hallway. We spoke very little after that. The rhythm of the house shifted. Morning coffee was brewed in silence. Meals were consumed separately, and doors opened and closed with a new kind of finality. She attempted conversations in the beginning, pleas dressed up as casual remarks, questions meant to reopen wounds. Once, as I returned from a client meeting, she waited in the foyer, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "It was just an escape," she said, voice hushed like confession. I paused beside the coat rack, loosened my tie, and met her eyes with a flat gaze. "Escapes have consequences," I replied, then walked past her without turning back. She never tried again after that. On day 12, her suspension from work was formalized in writing. She showed me the letter, as if expecting sympathy. It detailed an investigation into violations of corporate ethics and potential conflicts of interest involving her supervisor, Brian. The notice included a warning, termination pending review. Her salary froze immediately. Her posture, once elegant and proud, began folding in on itself. By day 18, Brian had been demoted and reassigned to a satellite office in another state. The news reached her through office whispers. She sat on the patio with her laptop open and a glass of untouched Chardonnay beside her, staring at the screen like it had delivered a personal betrayal. He had blocked her number. She cried that night, muffled sobs behind the guest room door. I didn't knock. The remaining days brought quiet formalities. Legal documents arrived for signing. Claire requested one meeting with my attorney to dispute the distribution terms, but the evidence stacks silenced any argument. The clause had been triggered. The contract was ironclad. Her admissions were time-stamped and archived. On day 29, she left a folded sheet on the kitchen counter, her agreement to the 80-20th split, signed in blue ink. The next morning, I came downstairs to find her by the front door, 2 suitcases at her feet. She wore the same coat from our honeymoon flight, a camel wool coat with a narrow belt, but the woman inside it looked smaller. She handed me the keys. I'm staying at Michelle's for a while. I accepted them without comment. She lingered for a second, eyes searching my face for something, regret, perhaps, or a door cracked open. I gave her nothing. The door closed behind her with a muted click. I didn't watch her leave. That afternoon, I returned to the office early. My assistant greeted me with the envelope I'd been expecting, a finalized equity agreement in a rising tech startup I'd been negotiating with for weeks. The funds Claire forfeited were now clean capital, perfectly positioned. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her betrayal had financed my next chapter. I returned home before sunset. The terrace was quiet, washed in amber light. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and settled into the chair Claire once claimed as her favorite. Across the yard, the wind stirred the edges of the garden. Somewhere in the city, traffic hummed like a distant storm. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from her. "I'm sorry. I messed up. You meant more than I knew." Then another. "It was an adventure. That's all it was. It didn't change how I felt about you." I stared at the words, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I typed, "The adventure ends. The consequences do not." I hit send and immediately blocked the number. Above me, the sky deepened to indigo. I opened the folder in my lap, the startup's vision statement, partnership terms, and financial projections. All of it crisp, forward-looking, untouched by lies. I had read through it a dozen times already, but tonight it felt different. Not just business. Freedom, signed in ink. I leaned back in the chair, the bourbon warming my throat, and let the silence wrap around me. Her phrase, "I'd do it again," had once stung like a blade. Now, it sat carved beneath every gain I held in my hands. The most profitable signature I'd ever received.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.